All right, guys. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. This is your buddy, Dr. J. Phoenix Singh. I want to welcome the entire Navigating Academia community to this live stream. I know that I didn't schedule this one. I know that I actually was supposed to do a live stream last week for everybody. Crazy last week. Dory and I moved from Spain back to the States. So now I'm in Great Falls, Virginia for the next couple of weeks. And then we will be moving to Turkey for the next 2.5 months. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to be able to see everybody. Welcome to everybody who's just coming into the room right now. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about a subject which is kind of near and dear to everybody's hearts. Doesn't matter if you applied this cycle for graduate school, be it for a master's degree or a doctoral degree, or whether you're going to be doing so in the future. Obviously, we could find ourselves in one of two situations, right? Either number one, we could find ourselves in a situation where we get accepted. Number two, we find ourselves in a situation where, unfortunately, we don't get in anywhere, so we get rejected. And for folks who are getting accepted, I've done a number of sessions this past week in terms of consults for people telling me, hey guys, welcome everybody new. For people who have gotten into programs, but they didn't get into maybe that number one or number two program that they deeply, deeply wanted to get into. What's up, everybody who's just joining us? Feel free to say hi in the chat, guys. I got my chat open right here, so I'd love to be able to say hi to you guys individually. So what do we do in these situations? What do we do if we got into the program that we wanted to get into? What do we do if we got in, but not to the program we really, really wanted to go to? And then also, what do we do if we actually got rejected from every program that we applied to? Some people who I've heard from literally only applied to one program and unfortunately didn't get in. I've had people this year who have applied to way too many programs. I had somebody who applied to over 20 programs and got over 20 rejections. And so because of that, I heard from them last week, and they're like, Dr. saying, this is a really strange situation I found myself in. I have no idea what to do. And so I think that it's really important to be able to have this conversation with one another right now, especially because between now until the end of the month, so until the end of February 2022 here, I'm not going to be able to, or I won't be taking on any additional sessions unless it's an absolute emergency. Because I'm back in the States, I'm with my family, so I'm sure you guys can understand. But like I said, if it's an emergency, let me know. But otherwise, I'll be chilling. But I still want to do this live stream for you guys regardless, because I really care about you. You guys know that. And I'm appreciative of your time watching videos and being here for me. So I want to be here for you guys as well. Okay. So let's start with the good news, right? If you ended up getting accepted to your target program or one of your target programs, for some of you, you guys weighed the pros and cons and you said, you know what, there's a few programs that I would actually be interested in. And if that's the case and you got into one of them, obviously I'm very, very thrilled for you guys. Thank you for sharing the news with me. If you did get into your target program, it makes me so happy to hear if any of the videos on the channel made any difference for you whatsoever. It really warms my heart. So what I've done is come up for each of these three different scenarios that I've outlined, 3 different tips that I've got for you guys. All right. So I'm going to take my phone, put it right here up against my computer to be able to read these off. And I'll go into each one of them in a little bit of detail for you guys, right? But we won't go over an hour. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, okay, while I'm going. And even if it's not related to this specific topic, put them in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. So here we go. All right, so situation number 1, you got into one of your target programs. First thing that I want you guys to do is not only to thank your lucky stars, because acceptance rates are ridiculous right now. Very, very low. I made a video on this in terms of reasons why I believe that acceptance numbers are so low right now due to things like the pandemic, for example, or not requiring standardized testing for certain programs being made more accessible because now they can be done remotely, or at least in part remotely, so on and so forth, right? Changes in pricing structure for programs. There's a lot of reasons why, but regardless of the reasons that contribute to it, acceptance rates have gone down and application numbers have gone up, right? So if you did get into a program, thank your lucky stars. But the first thing that I want you to do is to remember that you need to leave a trail. You've just been successful in climbing the first of what will become many Mount Everests in your professional career when it comes to, keep in mind I'm in psychology and a lot of you are in psychology. So it's psychology or whatever the field is that you really want to go into, right? This has been a Mount Everest for you guys to be able to climb. You've done it. You need to leave a trail behind you. A lot of people think to themselves, you know what? I didn't get into the program. I got into the program that I wanted to get into, and this was really, really tough. And so because of that, I kind of think it should be tough for the people behind me as well. that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, right? You've gotten in. There is no further benefit for you of your application materials, right? So be it your CV or your personal statement, or if you had a letter of recommendation strategy that you utilize to be able to get in, or in terms of your transcripts, even if you blot out kind of what grades you got just to show what classes you ended up taking, to be able to make those types of materials accessible to others. For example, people in the next cohort of applicants beneath you, right? Or if you have any, close friends who didn't unfortunately get into a program and you did get into a program, right? Then it's something where sharing those materials, I think, is a wonderful thing to be able to do. I don't want you to think to yourself, you know what, this is making their lives easier and it was hard for me, so it should be hard for them as well. Guys, that's nonsense, right? It's just nonsense. And it's completely antithetical to, if you're a subscriber to this channel or whatever, just know that we've almost got like 300 videos on the channel now, right? And the reason why I've taken the time to be able to build them is because I really care about you guys. And it's a situation where I didn't have a lot of support, right, coming up. And that's the thing, is I try to give you guys the support and spit as much free game as I can. And so you guys, I'm hoping that you guys will consider at least paying it forward as well. So that's number one, is write out your story and take your materials and just give them. Just give them, right? That's number one, okay? Have that grace to give them. Number two is to spend time building protective factors. Summer's going to be here before you know it, and all of a sudden, it's going to become time to maybe move to a new state, maybe even move to a new country, a new province, you name it, and get started with graduate school, be it a master's program or doctoral program, whatever it happens to be if you got in. And just remember that the psychiatric morbidity of major mental illnesses is twice that for graduate students relative to general population. And the numbers are crazy, right? So for men, it's about 36 to 38%. For women, it's about 44% of graduate students end up developing either major depression or a clinical anxiety disorder at some point during that graduate school process. And that's a scary thing, right? Especially if it's something where a lot of people, for example, in behavioral health sciences, psychology, psychiatry, nursing, social work, counseling, a lot of people have come to this because they've had mental health challenges in the past, right? And what ends up happening for something like, let's say, clinical depression, is that it basically compromises the functioning of this little area right here between your eyes in the frontal lobe called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which if you never want to get invited to another dinner party for the rest of your life, just say dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and you'll never be invited again. But what ends up happening is that because it's compromised, if you are placed into another very high stress situation, the likelihood that you will manifest signs and symptoms of clinical depression again magnifies significantly, right? It's multiplicatively higher. So just take that into consideration. So what we need to do is to be very proactive right now, because we're about to go into something where usually the first year of grad school, I'm going to be honest with you, is like one of the greatest years of my life. I freaking loved it, right? But then after that, shit hits the fan, right? And because of that, it's really important that right now, when we have the time to be able to really build up healthy relationships with family members, with friends, you name it, right? I want you to take that time and really build those resources up, right? And remember, I usually talk about these 7 different dimensions of optimization, right? So these are your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your occupational, educational health. So this could be things like building a budget for yourself, for example, especially now, maybe you know that you've got funding, or maybe you have no funding. So you got to be really tight with the budget, whatever it happens to be. And then 3 kinds of social optimization, right? So this is social health with your family, social health with your friends, and social health with a romantic partner if you happen to have one, right? Going into grad school. These are 7 different areas that, practically speaking, you can focus on right now in terms of improving those relationships. Get your physical health in order, build healthy habits in terms of what you put into your body in terms of food, as well as how much sleep you're getting, how much exercise you're getting, and how consistent you're being with these things. Practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, right? But practice builds habits, right? And we need to build those healthy habits now to the extent that we can, okay? It's really, really important. Okay, that's number 2. Welcome to everybody who's just joined us. The third, right, is to start thinking about life after graduate school and what you're going to need to do in these upcoming years to be able to meet that new goal. If you guys watch the channel religiously, you'll know that something that I usually talk about is it's really important as early as possible in your undergraduate career to be able to identify target grad school programs, and then to be able to work everything backwards in terms of personal connections, building up your CV and so forth to be able to get into that target program, especially if it's a program that's in absurdly high demand. So if it's something like a PhD in clinical psychology where acceptance rates are, historically, under 5%, and the last couple of years have been like under 2%, you need to begin that process as fast as you can, right, in undergrad. Same thing is true in graduate school, though, right? Once you've gotten into graduate school, you need to start thinking about what the next step is. Maybe you want to be in academia, right? So maybe you want to do a postdoc. Maybe you want to apply for tenure track faculty positions, right? Maybe that's what the dream is for you. Maybe you want to teach, but at like a teaching oriented undergraduate only institution, not an R1, not an R2, none of these sorts of things. You don't want to care about external funding or anything like this, right? Maybe instead of being a tenure track professor, you want to be a research professor, meaning that it's critical that you learn everything about grant seeking, grant writing, grant management, right? Maybe it's something where you want to be a full-time clinician. So you need to really focus on building up your clinical skill sets, getting your clinical certifications in different types of techniques, you name it, learning about sales and marketing in terms of private practices, if that's something you're interested in. These are all things that you can develop in terms of knowledge bases and skill sets during graduate school, right? But you got to think about where you want to end up, and then we can work it backwards together, okay? And I know that sounds crazy. It's just like, I haven't even started graduate school yet. Already you want me thinking about these things? But the answer is, yeah, I do. I want you to think about these things. Hey, Kathy, right? Hey, Kathy! Good job, Kathy. Kathy, so Kathy, if anybody can't say, so Kathy says, this live came at a perfect time. I just received my first acceptance letter, earlier this week for a PsyD in clinical psych. Awesome. Kathy, whereabouts? Can you tell me? While Kathy's typing, I'll just quickly come to the end of this, right? Then we'll go on to the next one. So that's the idea, guys, right? I want you to focus, like really, really focus on what you want in terms of your eventual career, and then work it all backwards. Okay, so that's really the critical thing if you did get into a program. So let's say that you got into a program, right? But that program that you got into was not your target program, and now you're trying to figure out WTF, kind of like what do I do? Oh, awesome, Kathy. So Kathy says in Seattle, Washington. So Nirvana City, what's up? That sounds great, Kathy. That's awesome. Do you think, is this one, Kathy, that you would actually go to? Would you agree to go to that one? So let's say you got in, but not to your target program. The first thing you need to do is you need to evaluate why it is that the target program or the target programs, why was that one or those multiple schools, why were those the targets, right? What was it about the program that you really liked, right? So that's what you need to think about, right? So you didn't get into the ones you wanted to, you got in somewhere, right? So in certain cases, right, yes, there's a really key reason why that target program was your target program, right? Maybe there were two programs with a really strong goodness of fit between you and the target supervisor. The other ones, it was kind of a stretch. And now you're saying, well, I got into a program, but this program just seems like it's going to be a real pain in the butt because I'm going to spend the next 4 to 6 years of my life working in a lab, which is just not exactly what I want to do in the long run. Or it's a topic that's, in terms of the current research line in that lab, it's something that I'm interested in, but I'm not super interested. Or the other programs maybe was for PsyDs and you were applying to these really big name schools. And then also, I always joke around and say like St. Mary's of Georgia, some random small school. And you got into the small school, but you didn't get into the other ones, right? So maybe it's the cachet associated with the name of the school, right? Maybe it's a geographic issue, right? So I have a number of clients I've worked with this year who are in specific states and they have things tying them there, right? They have family, they have, like families of their own. They have, in some cases, God forbid, but in some cases they have, sick parents that they have to look after. There's all sorts of reasons. Maybe they're married and they have a spouse and the spouse can't move, so they're just there. Okay, and then all of a sudden they got one offer and it's across the country. Okay, well, what do we do now, right? So that's the first thing, is coming up with a practical list. Because if it's something that's silly, so for example, if one of the programs is like in Los Angeles and another one is in Sacramento, and you're just like, you know what, I don't like Sacramento. I've always wanted to be in LA. So, that was the reason why that was my target program. Just being honest, that's a silly reason to be able to pick a school, right? In the long run, of course, hey, if you want to be in LA, my sister used to live in LA, love LA, right? You can totally go to LA. But in terms of, deciding on a program versus not, if that's the only thing that was preventing you from going to one program, you should probably just go to the damn program, right? Especially if it's something where, just remember, guys, that yes, this is like the furthest that you've gotten career-wise so far, but at the end of the day, think about how old you are, right? Think about retiring at 65 or 70, right? At the earliest for most people. And you'll realize that, grad school is really not that long of a time. You're going to have so many years ahead of you, right? To be able to do other things. And I can tell you guys that really, when it comes to, especially if you want to be a therapist, for example, which I know a lot of you do, if you want to be a therapist, nobody's going to be like, well, he's a great therapist, but I don't know, the school that he went to, I don't know, right? If you're great at what you do, right, this is going to shine through absolutely everything else, right? For example, in terms of people that I've worked with in the past who are therapists, the greatest therapists I've ever met are not psychologists. The greatest therapists I've ever met are social workers and counselors, right, at the master's level. It's just the case for me. I've met one phenomenal MD psychiatrist, right? Or actually two phenomenal MD psychiatrists, one in Switzerland, the other one in the States. But it's one of these situations where, the degree that you end up getting, hang on, Daria says, green to the handsomest professor in the universe. Thank you, my love. Right. So this is just one of these situations where it's really, really important to recognize that the letters after your name, be it PhD or MD or DPhil or DClinSci or MED or whatever, right, does not have any bearing on how amazing of a therapist you're going to be. So just remember that, right? And just please feel encouraged by that. It's very important. Okay, so think about why it is that program or those programs were the target programs and other ones were not, okay? The second thing is that it's not fun and it's not sexy, but I want you to consider the costs, financial costs, but also just the time-related costs associated with delaying acceptance to the next cycle, right? And reapplying. The likelihood is relatively low that if you get accepted into a program and you say, you know what, thank you for taking all the time of your faculty members, to accept me, but I'm going to say no. As people oftentimes think, I'm just going to apply again the next year. And I can tell you that in terms of, surveys that have been done of this, if you end up asking, department chairs and, just professors in general who take on grad students and you say, would this impact if you said no, and then the next year you apply again, would this practically speaking impact the likelihood of you getting in? And you want to know what they say when it's not blinded, right? When people know their identities, they say, oh, no, wouldn't matter at all. Wouldn't matter at all, right? But you want to know what happens when it's blinded, right? Meaning that's totally anonymous. They say, yeah, it would totally impact it. They wasted my darn time, right? The first year. And so because of that, they're more likely to choose somebody else initially instead of yourself. So just know that that's the case. This happens a lot. It's the same thing when it comes to, for example, like peer review. So if you're in a peer review situation with the journal, for instance, right? So like peer review journal, and you submit an article to them, and this article that you submit to them is already in a repository. It's in a open access repository, right? Lightbringer says, I think Daria might be biased. Probably, right? So that's hilarious. So it's one of these, that's so fun. So it's one of these situations where, I'm getting thrown up. It's one of these situations where, if something is in an open access repository already, and you say, you know what, I really want this thing to get accepted, right, for publication. So you ask the editors in chief, you survey them, and you say, if something's already out there in a repository form, will that impact the likelihood of you accepting it? And of course, they say no. And then all of a sudden, you blind it, right, and you anonymously survey, and they'll basically say that it's about 30% less likely that they will accept the article. Right. So it does place a significant obstacle in the way of getting a peer-reviewed publication. And it is mandatory, or it should be mandatory for most journals, right? But it's certainly best practice, ethically speaking, to be able to disclose whether or not an article or a manuscript that you're submitting for publication, whether or not it actually is currently, out there in the public domain in some way, shape, or form, even for something like open review, like in a repository. Okay. So, in any case, right? Considering the costs, it's not just a financial thing, right? Because at the end of the day, the younger you are, because I know a lot of you guys, if I just take a look at the channel's demographics, the overwhelming preponderance of you guys are between 18 to 35. And then after that, the next tertile down is 35 to 50. And then it kind of, lower, higher, bounds kind of go down, right? So I know the percentages, I know the numbers on the channel, right, in terms of folks who watch the channel. And the thing is that these are the prime years in terms of just we're all trying to figure our lives out, right? 21 to 35, we're just trying to figure this shit out, man. We're just trying to figure it out, right? This is a very difficult time of life because you're trying to figure out, your identity. You're trying to figure out, your future. Who do you want to be in the future? Project that out, and then, figure out what you need to be able to get there. You're trying to figure out your job. You're trying to stack your money. And you're trying to figure out what kind of a family structure you would like to have in the future. And I would love to say that you've got forever to figure those things out. But the fact of the matter is, you guys know about compound interest. The earlier you start saving money, the more time you have to be able to compound it, right? And so because of that, taking into consideration things like financial planning, like family planning, again, not a sexy topic, but a really important one, right? Delaying another year means that you're going, in many cases, let's say for a clinical psych PhD or PsyD program, right? Most of these PsyD programs, for example, because Kathy was just mentioning one in Seattle that she got into, so go Kathy. Most of these PsyD programs, when you take a look at the stats published on APA's websites, what you're going to find is that the majority of the programs, the median number of years to graduation historically was like 4 years. And now if you just look at the medians the last several years, all of a sudden it's becoming 5 years. You can blame the pandemic, but I'm not quite sure what's going on. But the data doesn't lie, right? That's what the data says, right? So that means that if you delay, that you're basically going from 5 years to 6 years, right? So right now, if you're applying and you are, for example, 25, you'll be 31. A lot of people who apply to these programs are non-traditional students. They're changing careers. They've been in industry for a while. They got out of undergrad and they were, working in applied behavioral analysis, or they're working in palliative care at a hospital, whatever it happens to be. And then they're like, okay, I was doing that for 3 years. Now I know I want to go for the doctorate. Now I know I want to go for the clinical master's. And so this is one of these things where then all of a sudden we're just delaying. Right. And this does have a significant impact on your finances, and it does have a significant impact as well on family planning. Right. And these are really practical things to think about. So if you've gotten in somewhere, right, that's not going to break the bank. Some of these PsyD programs are nuts. Right. There was one. I've never heard of the one program, right, before somebody brought it to me. They brought me their personal statement to review for them. I'm not kidding, guys. The tuition was $330,000 US. That is insane. Right? That is absolutely crazy. What I always recommend is that for any clinical career, or any career period, right? So let's say you're in the US, go to Bureau of Labor Statistics and find out how much the median and the average income is, right, for that job. And keep in mind that that's not right after you get out of grad school and get licensed. That is like everybody at the beginning of the career and the end of the career. Coming into the middle, that's the number that you're dealing with, right? Some people do exceptionally better and some people do exceptionally worse, right? But that's the thing, is that this particular individual, when we took a look at PsyDs in their state and we took a look at first year median income, right? First year median income was about $62,000 US, right? So you're going to take on $250,000 doing a full-time program, not taking into consideration cost of living. And also you're losing income for those years, right? As well as, amassing the debt. And then in exchange, you're doing something for less than $70,000 a year. That does not make financial sense. I'm just telling you, right? Running the numbers is really important. It's not sexy. It's not fun, but it is practical and it is important. So if it's something where you got into a program, but not the dream program, it's definitely one of these things where it's important to take into consideration. All right. So that's number 2. If you guys ever want to sit down and just run your numbers in these things, or you're running the numbers and you want me to take a look at them, we can do that, right? I do it at least 3 or 4 times a month with people, right? So that's number 2. Third thing, if you get in but not to the target program, right, is make a decision and stick with it, right? Regret will eat you alive in this life. And so if you decide that, you know what, I'm just going to wait for the next cycle, right? Understandably, there's going to be a lot of anxiety because there's uncertainty. Right? And uncertainty breeds anxiety, right? So what ends up happening, though, is that if you say, no, I'm not going to accept this acceptance, right? I'm not going to go to that school. Okay. I want to apply to these schools again next cycle, see if I can get into one of my target programs, right? I'm going to do everything I can in the meanwhile to be able to max out my qualifications and become a more competitive candidate, right? But if this is the decision you're going to make, that you're not going to take the acceptance, then do it. right? There's an author. I don't know if any of you guys know D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence is the man, right? He did like Lady Chatterley's Lover. He did this one called, I think it was The Rocking Horse Winner, was one of my all-time favorite short stories. And D.H. Lawrence said, be silent, but when genuine passion moves you, say what you have to say and say it hot, right? That's what D.H. Lawrence said. And this is the same thing, right? If you're going to make this decision, right, make it. Do not look back on this moment in your life and say, oh, I really regret that. I should have taken that decision. Da, da, da. These regrets will eat you alive. Own the decision. Own it, right? If you take the position, if you take the job, okay, or not the job, if you take that doctorate or that master's offer, right, take it, right? That is your offer. It's nobody else's, right? You make the decision. Don't let mom and dad make the decision. Don't let the boyfriend or girlfriend make the decision. Don't let anybody else make the decision, okay? This is your decision. This is your life. You've got one shot at this thing, right? And you want to make sure that you live it in such a way that if you fail, that's your failure. And if you succeed, that's your success. We can't blame anybody else for either of them, okay? So, very, very important, right? That we not look back with any sense of regret whatsoever in this regard, okay? And when you move forward, I want you to move forward aggressively. And I don't mean aggressively like being a dick, right? And just like, no, of course not, right? When I say move forward aggressively, what I mean is do it with a sense of purpose, right? Thoreau has this quote. It's one of my favorites. I talk about it all the time on the channel in my personal life, that don't fret if you've built castles in the sky. That's where they're intended to be. Now build foundations under them, right? This is that exact concept, right? Build foundations, right? Underneath the dreams that you have moving forward, okay? And oftentimes these dreams are very lofty, and oftentimes lesser people who have not met their dreams are going to tell you that your dreams are stupid, right? And I do not want you to listen to those people, right? I forget what the quote is. There's a great quote about like, do it twice so they can't deny it or something like that, right? But yeah, it's one of these situations where if anybody says, you definitely can't do it, and you have looked at the data and you have looked at your background, these things, and you objectively feel that you can do it, then I say, F it, do it, right? That's my opinion on that, okay? So, hey, Shawshank, congratulations, man. This is great. So it says, I got into my top choice astronomy PhD program at Yale thanks to Dr. Singh's interview prep videos. Amazing. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. I really, really appreciate it. This honestly, guys, is like this time of year is my favorite time of year. Just hearing from you guys, letting me know whether or not any of the videos helped, right? It's a huge blessing to me. You guys have no idea. It keeps me really, really motivated to keep the channel going. We've already got videos for every single week this entire year, right? Planned. And I'll, of course, keep doing lives and responding to your guys' comments and these things on the channel. So thank you so much, guys, for sharing with me. It means the world. Okay, very good. So the final thing that I want to talk about today, right, is what do you do if you got rejected, right? What'd you do if you got rejected everywhere? So it's a pleasure, man. What do you do if you got rejected everywhere? Because that's a really scary thing, right? If you got rejected everywhere. A few things that I want to say here. The first thing is a lot of people will try to give you the whole, shebang about, looking on the bright side and these sorts of things, right? Look on the bright side and especially people in psych will be like, just cognitively reframe everything, right? Almost like a CBT robot or something, right? Which would be a very interesting movie. I'd watch that. That sounds like a Netflix special, right? CBT robots. And we call them the like the Beck 2000s or something like that, or the BDIs, for those of you who get that joke. So the first thing to do, though, is that I don't really want you to listen to that. The first thing I want you to do is to grieve, right? Because grief has a very important function, practically speaking, right? When these things happen, because you are mourning the death of the future that you thought you would have. Okay. Sometimes this happens in life when we have a parent who unfortunately passes away, or a friend that unfortunately passes away. I had 3 of my closest friends who took their own lives when I was growing up. And I'll tell you that all 3 of these people, they're people that you just expect you're going to go through your whole life with, right? You just think about being at each other's weddings, and you think about being at their kids' birthday parties, and you're going to go through life together, and all of a sudden they're gone. And that future that you imagined for yourself essentially is destroyed. And it's one of these things where, particularly when we're younger, so if we got rejected, like I remember when I got rejected from all of my dream undergraduate colleges, right? I had a 4.0 GPA, I had great test scores, I had amazing letters of recommendation, I had all this stuff, right? I still got rejected from the overwhelming majority of my dream schools, which, to be fair, were really big name schools, right? But I thought I had at least one in the bag, and I did not, right? And so, really lit a fire under my butt for grad school, but I really had to grieve that loss of my future life and what I thought that was going to be at the time, right? And there's a process that is called the Personal Fable, which is something that we develop in adolescence. And now we know, in terms of the cognitive neuroscience literature, that really that stage of adolescence, really these days we talk about it going into your 20s, into so-called emerging adulthood now in the developmental psych literature. And what ends up happening during this time period is that there's a part of your brain, right? All parts of your brain, basically, in terms of your cerebral cortex, undergoes something called myelinization. And we'll be here all day, but just know that basically what it does is that it creates a faster form of processing information than previously existed. And one of the things that it does is that two things it does. Number one is that it creates this imaginary audience. Were you guys ever in the case where, like, you're walking around campus, or you're walking around, the halls in high school, and like you trip and you're like, oh my God, everybody's looking at me. Everybody's like staring at me now that I've fallen. That's the imaginary audience, right? Or maybe you go up to somebody in the bar and, you ask them out on a date and they're just like, no, thank you very much. Whatever it is, right? Same situation, right? You're like, oh my God, everybody at the bar is looking at me. The likelihood that anybody's looking at you is exceptionally low. And the likelihood that they care is even lower, right? But that's the thing. Our brain does this to us. It creates this imaginary audience. And the other thing that it does is that it fosters this so-called personal fable. The idea here is very simple, right? Let's say that you text and you drive, and everybody's just like, oh my God, you're going to do a car accident. Our brains trick us into saying, yeah, but that's other people. That's not me, right? Other people have unprotected sex and get pregnant at age, whatever, a young age, but not me. That's just not my story, right? Other people, like I said, text and drive and, become, paraplegics, quadriplegics, but not me. It's just not my story, right? But the fact of the matter is that there's nothing about us inherently that makes us invincible to any of these situations. And that process, right, of making these assumptions that we are somehow special and that we are the protagonist in the story and the movie of our lives, right, is what we refer to as the personal fable, okay? And all of us at some stage in our life, for me, it was in graduate school personally, right? We have to confront the fact that the personal fable is false, right? For me in grad school, I thought I was a great writer, right? Like undergraduate GPA was like 3.96, had published a textbook, had published all these papers. I thought I was really good. And then I went to Oxford and I was not, right? I reread some of my initial manuscripts that I wrote there. I was not. I legit sucked. Right? If you go back and you read them, you'd be like, damn, Dr. Singh is really bad. Right? And as a guy who now has got like 90 publications and 4 books, right? It's just like, trust me, I look back now and I'm like, I did not know what I was doing. But I had a lot of confidence. I thought I was the ish, like I just did. Right? And it's just one of those situations where I had to come to grips with the fact that in many ways that I'd convinced myself that I was special or more talented or more whatever than other people, I had to recognize that I essentially had an infinitesimally long way to go kind of in the future, right? And that's when I got in, right? Let alone me getting rejected from all those places undergrad I really wanted to go to, right? That was a big knock to my system because I had that story of my life and it didn't come true, right? The next thing to do, which I would argue is the most important thing after we've dealt with that grief, sit in the feeling and feel it. Give yourself 48 to 72 hours after every rejection letter you get to just feel like shit, right? That's okay. I'm giving you permission, not that you need it, right? But you can do it, right? In terms of just feeling like crap, right? Go out, eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, don't get on the elliptical, right? And just be like, right? You can do it, right? And then after that, let's go. Okay. And the next thing that I want you to do is what's called a postmortem. Think about, I remember when Hillary Clinton didn't get elected to be president and Trump got elected instead. And when this happened, a lot of people were very confused about what happened. And so what the Democratic Party in the US did was that all these top politicos got together and they did what's called a postmortem, right? Republican Party had to do it, right? And the postmortem is basically saying this didn't work. Why not? What did we not have? What went wrong, right, to the point where we didn't actually win the election, okay? And this is the same thing that you need to do if you end up getting rejected from graduate school, from all the programs, right, including the ones you want to go to and even the ones that you thought were low-hanging fruit that you definitely get into, all right? You need to re-examine your application materials, okay? Remember what I always talk about is that particularly for clinical programs, there are 8 different critical things that you need to take a look at, okay? The first are the top 5. These are 5 things you guys know if you watch the channel, I call them the 5 lies because these are the 5 things that everybody thinks because they're told by freaking everybody, this is what you need to get in, and then you have all 5 of them. But given the current environment of applying to graduate school, these are 5 things that you must have, but they will not get you accepted to graduate school. I'm telling you right now. Having all 5 of these amazing things will make you average, okay? First one, right, is median or above GPA for your target programs, right? I cannot, nobody, guys, if anybody says like, well, you need at least a 3.7 to get into these programs, bullshit. Right? You need to look at the programs you want to go to. It could be way higher. It could be like 3.9, or it could be way lower. It could be like 3.2. You just need to focus on the darn programs first. Find the programs first, work the process backwards, okay? So that's number 1, median or above grades. Second one is median or above test scores, right? If your grades aren't super duper, right, I do recommend taking the GRE, right? Even for schools where it's not required, I would just say take it, right? And then if you screw the pooch and it's terrible, right, then don't submit the scores, right? But if you do amazing, that is something that can help to be able to offset the mediocre GPA, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that let's say you want to go into, let's just say psychology, right? You want to go into psych and you're a non-traditional student and you don't have a lot of psych courses, a lot of psych background. Take something like the psych GRE, right? Why would you take the psych GRE? To be able to show that even though you don't have a lot of that foundational coursework that somebody who's 22 coming out of undergrad that they have, right? But at the same time, you've mastered that content. You just don't have an undergraduate degree in it where you majored in that subject, okay? So that's where you can use the GRE. And especially in this day and age, I would say that those are the 2 reasons why you should take the GRE, even if it's something that's not necessarily required, okay? Outside of that, though, if it's not required, then don't take it, right? Not necessary. It's a huge pain in the butt. Right. If you do take it, right, I do recommend watching the videos on the channel about how to, kick ass on the GRE, right? Because I suck at testing. I don't know about you guys. I suck at it. Some people are great, right? So the fact that I was able to take it and do really well using evidence-based principles from psych, I can teach you how to do it as well. Just watch the videos on the channel. It's totally free. Just watch them. Okay. The next thing, right, is going to be letters of recommendation. 3 letters of recommendation. If it's a clinical degree, you need somebody who's going to talk about you clinically. Somebody will talk about you from a personal perspective. Somebody who can talk about you academically. Instead of that personal perspective, if it's a program that has both research and clinical elements, screw the personal one. You need a research person, a clinical, and an academic person. And no, these people should not be talking about the same things. People are freaking scared to death to be able to go to their letter writers and say, hey, Professor Johnson, this, handsome bald dude, on YouTube, recommended that you, get letters of recommendation and that you actually, give, I call them the greatest hits list, right? That you give a list of 5 to 10 bullet points of the things that you think would help you get into the program for consideration and incorporating that information into their letter, right? You're not telling them, hey, do it. No, you're just saying, I value your time. I respect you so much. You have so much going on. You're doing me a favor here. I want to make sure this process is as straightforward as possible for you. And I'm just deeply grateful. And so I've come up with these 5 to 10 bullet points. I think that if we, use this angle, that this will help me out a tremendous amount. Thank you so much again for your consideration, right? That's it. That's the way to be able to approach it, right? That's going to get you the best chance of getting all 3 of those different perspectives in for your 3 letters. All right. In addition to that, we need practical experience. So if you want to be in a clinical degree program like a social work or a counseling or a PsyD or a clinical psych PhD, right, then that's what you want to do, okay? That's one of these situations where you need clinical experience and you need research experience. Even if you want to get a clinical degree, it's still not a bad idea to get some research experience, especially if it's clinical research, okay? Why? Because when you go to these clinical programs, they're not just going to teach you how to practice. They're going to teach you evidence-based best practices. Okay, evidence-based. There's an evidence base. It's called research, right? If you can learn how to be able to make contributions to the peer-reviewed research literature, right, this puts you in a really good spot, especially for things like PsyD programs where they deeply want to be like clinical psych PhD programs, right? And clinical psych PhD programs are research-based programs, right? So just something for you guys to be able to take into consideration. Welcome, guys, by the way, to anybody who's just joining us right now. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button just because it prioritizes us in the algorithm in terms of getting more viewers here as we finish up. Okay, so if you've got those 5 things, okay, in terms of your median or above GPA, median or above test scores for your program, right? In addition to that, having your letters of recommendation, your clinical experience, and your research experience, minimum of 1 semester of both, so 6 months of both, minimum, okay? After you've got those 5, okay, that makes you average, right? And it's just like, mother, right? But it is what it is, right? 3 things or whatever that can particularly help you get into these programs, right? And the likelihood is that even if you had these 5, one of these 3, right, you may not have had, right? And that's a good thing. If you got rejected from every program and you're like, I had those things, what else could I possibly have? One of these 3 could possibly help you out in kind of like a little middle way. So like these are the 5 critical things. There's 2 that are essential, right? And then we've got 1 that's like, and that 1 is conferences, right? And I don't mean an undergraduate conference. I don't mean even graduate student conference. If you're a master's going for a doctorate, no state conferences, no regional conferences. I want you to go to the big ones, okay? A national conference or an international conference with a good name, right? A name that would be recognized, particularly by the individuals who you would perceive to be your dream future supervisors. Just go to the CV, damn it, right? Of your future, hey, Jillian, how you doing? Right? Of your future, your target future supervisor, right? Go to their CV. Take a look. Where do they go? Look at their conference presentation section, right? Find out where they go and then go there. Say hi, right? Write to them beforehand. Invite them to stop by your poster. Invite them to come to your symposium. Invite them to come to the panel that you're discussing things on. Whatever it happens to be, right? Invite them for coffee. Tell them that you're going to, be at the bar at some stage because this is where everybody meets up at these things, whether you drink or not. Just get some grape juice and grape juice out, baby, right? Whatever you want to do. But you need to actually meet these people, okay? So that's the second thing, not just conference presentation, but also personal connections. Personal connections will trump everything. If you have, this year, I helped 2 people get in, one person at a 2.7 GPA, the other one at a 2.9 GPA, right? I ended up working with them for a minimum 7 months. One of them was 12 months after they got rejected, right? And we just met once a month and came up with milestones every single month about what they needed to do, right? And we really pushed that angle, right, of being able to build these personal connections. Why? Because the GPAs were not good, right? And to be honest with you, there wasn't a strong narrative behind why. Personal statement is critical because the personal statement gives you the opportunity to be able to clarify why it is that anything that may not be quite kosher, if you know what I'm saying, wasn't kosher in the first place. Maybe one particular semester your grades tanked. Maybe it's something where 2 of the most important classes you're going to take are something like psych stats, just any stats class, and research methods, okay? If you balls those up and you got like C's in them, that's not good, right? You should retake those classes or take an advanced version of those classes and then bust your butt and get an A in those classes, right? Whatever your top grade is, right? That's what you should do, right? But regardless, you need to address this kind of stuff in the personal statement, right? If you guys have ever worked with me in terms of consults, you know that I have a 5-paragraph structure that I utilize. I have videos that I put online for you guys of me going through personal statements from this past year, of just doing it for free, going and just showing you guys how I evaluate them. Please watch those videos so that you can see how somebody like myself who reads these things every year, hundreds of these things a year, when I go through, this is what I'm looking for, and these are the things that I see as routine problems. And I narrate the hell out of those videos. I did the same thing for CVs. This year, I'm going to do the same thing for diversity statements for free. So later on in the year, there'll be a video that'll come out that'll invite you guys to send your diversity statements to me, right? And I'll look at them for free or whatever and make videos, and, I will show you guys what to do, okay? Because I think that was really helpful last year for you guys. I want to keep doing it for you, all right, in kind of new ways. Personal connections trumps everything. No, if you send an email to somebody, you're like, hey, Dr. Singh, I love your stuff. right? Would really love to be your graduate student in these things. I'm going to be applying this fall. Hope that everything is good, right? That's not a personal connection. I really appreciate it, right? But usually, most of us, right, or grad school supervisors, we have like a copy and paste message, right? Where they'll be like, dear, and then you put the person's name. Dear James, thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate your kind words, and I look forward to looking at your application materials. Hope to meet you soon. All the best, Dr. Singh, right? If you've got an email like that, you may be like, son of a bitch, right? This guy literally just told me the email that I got from my target supervisor. But oftentimes that's what happens, right? But we get so many emails. Like, that's the problem, right? Especially some of these like bigger name schools. My one buddy, he runs the clinical psych PhD program at Drexel. And he told me that they get over like 125 applications for every one supervisor accepting one student, right? So it's a fraction of a percent acceptance rate, right? So you can imagine that if you're getting that many applications, you're going to get 50, 100 emails as well, right? You need to meet these people in person. In some cases, I recommend just getting on a plane. Get on a plane. If you want to go to Drexel, fly to Philly, right? Set up a meeting with the target supervisor and say, I'm going to be in town anyway, and I would love the opportunity to be able to come and, buy you lunch. Your work's been very influential on me. I know you're incredibly busy, but if you let me know when you're free, I will make anything in your schedule work for my schedule, right? Do it. Spend the money, right? Stay at a Red Roof Inn for $15 on a Groupon, right? And make that personal connection. Sounds ridiculous? It works, right? A lot of the things, guys, that I talk about on this channel sound ridiculous, right? But it works, right? Just take a look. I take so much joy, guys, in adding to the community tab when people send me emails and these things saying, that they got into the program after doing the consult sessions and these things. It makes me really happy because the stuff does work, right? And it's just one of these things. I call it uncommon common sense or uncommon common knowledge, right? And so it's just one of those situations where learning how to do these things is one thing, but executing on it is another, okay? And you know what? Just drive for Uber, do, Uber Eats or Grubhub or Glovo if you're in Europe. Daria knows I love Glovo, right? And you do these things or whatever, make a little bit of extra money, get a cheap flight, right? And go and stay in a Red Roof crappy inn, right? Or like a Super 8 or something like this, right? And make it happen, right? The fact of the matter is all these people who are competing with you, right? Who have also applied in these things. Those people they don't care about you, right? They're going to do whatever they can to get the spot over you, right? Playing small is not going to do you any favors, right? We need to go after acceptance. I have a video that I made, I think my first year or whatever of the channel 4 years ago, was crazy, right? Called Academia is a Blood Sport, right? And I really believe that, right? And the more you get into it, the more you're like, this is like the Kardashians of education, right? In terms of academia as a field. But at the end of the day, those are the top 7 or whatever, right? And then the 8th is publications, right? Publications in an impact factored peer-reviewed journal. Supply and demand, right? This is a situation where such an overwhelming minority of undergraduates and even, master's level students, a tiny minority of them actually have a publication of any kind, right? Edited book chapter. It can't be any kind of contemporary publication. Can't be a digital newsletter article. Sorry. Can't be a blog post. Can't be a podcast that you run. It can't be any of the, unfortunately, they don't count as publications. But if you've got something in an impact factor journal or in an edited book, especially from one of the big 5 are the academic publishers whose publications account for over 60% of all academic books and articles. And those 5 are Elsevier, some people will say Elsevier, right? Springer, Taylor and Francis, which runs Routledge, Wiley and Sage. Those are your big 5, right? If you end up getting a chapter in an edited book published by one of those big 5, you're in a great position as well, right? But if you, and by the way, self-published books and these things don't count. Sorry, right? Those don't count as publications. I'm sure you worked very, very hard on them. They don't count. Sorry, right? So it's one of these situations where if you end up having these credentials, though, you are significantly more likely to get accepted to graduate school. So if you didn't get in anywhere, I want you guys to literally write those 8 things down, right? GPA, test scores, letters of recommendation, practical experience, research experience, conference presentations at the national and international level, personal connections, and peer-reviewed publications, right? I want you to write those 8 down and be really radically honest with yourself and say, which of these do I just not have, right? And discern in retrospect which ones should I have had or could I develop here within the next X number of months, right? Fact of the matter is, guys, is that it's mid-February right now. If you didn't get in anywhere, right, you have got what? Less than 10 months now, right? Essentially to do the whole kit and caboodle over again, right? And that's just an important thing to be able to acknowledge, right? That's the amount of time we have. So how are we going to make use of this time? Okay. Obviously, if you need any help, I can help you with it, right? In terms of like actually planning and plotting stuff out, right? But do that postmortem and take the time, right? This is a deeply personal process, right? And I want you guys to take that time to be able to go and just look at the landscape of your application, all right? A lot of people apply to too many damn programs, right? The number of sessions I've had this year, guys, is at least 30 sessions where people have told me, I didn't listen to you the first time. I applied to 10 to 20 plus programs. I got rejected everywhere. This year, I applied to 3 to 5 programs and I got into 2 of them, right? Because people are terrified of applying to smaller numbers of programs. But if you apply to more, you're going to end up in a situation where you don't do what's necessary because it takes an absurd amount of time to be able to build the personal connections, get to know the target supervisor or supervisors, their work as well as you need to establish that perception of the goodness of fit, meet with the people, pay the money, fly out, go to the conferences. This takes so much time and energy, guys, right? But if you do that for a program and somebody else is just like, well, I got a 4.0 GPA, I have 99th percentile of my GRE, I've got 3 amazing I got 3 amazing letters of recommendation, and I've been working in a lab, and I also in a clinic, right, since my sophomore year. Well, guess who's going to get in? The first person, not the 4.0 person with all the stuff. It's just not how grad school applications work. Undergrad, it's much more like that, right? Grad school applications, guys, grad school is just different. A big mistake people make is that they just treat applying for grad school like they did for undergrad, right? Or they come into it recently discovering the behavioral health sciences and they're like, I really want to get into the programs, right? But they haven't done any prep work. They don't understand how the game is played. And at the end of the day, they get rejected everywhere. And then, it's a blessing to have them find the channel and reach out. I work with a lot of non-traditional students, right? Who are, career changers and these things, or have recently discovered that this is what they want to do. Maybe undergrad, they were a poli-sci major. Now it's senior year and they're like, oh shit, that this is what I want to do. How do you do that, right? So sensible. So run that postmortem, okay? Finally, right? Decide what's next and move forward aggressively. Decide whether you actually want to go to graduate school, right? Is it necessary, right? Or is it something where, you just want to be called doctor? Don't do that, right? Or is it something where your parents are pressuring you because you would be the first generation of people in your family to be able to go get a master's or a doctorate? Or is it something where you don't know what to do? Maybe you just lost your job and you're like, you know what, where I am in my life right now, maybe this is the time if I want to go back to school. But you're not 100% sure, right? Please don't do that, right? Please just save the money and really sit down or whatever and think about this. This is, again, something I at least have sessions like 5 or 6 times a month with people who are just trying to make the decision about what is next in their life. And I take so much joy in those conversations because it's very clarifying for people, right? But decide what's next. Are you going to apply again? Are you not? Sorry, are you going to apply again? Or it's just something where you gave it a shot and you're like, no, you know what? Maybe it's something where I don't actually need that degree to do what I want to do. A lot of people think that they need a degree to be able to do something in particular that they don't, right? And so it's important to be able to really make sure that if you're going to apply again, that you aggressively, deal with those holes in your CV, right? And simultaneously that you do not let any sense of regret bleed in there, right, to the point where you start blaming not getting accepted on other things or other people or an undergrad supervisor who you feel like gave you bad advice or whatever it is. Just radical accountability and ownership, and then move forward aggressively. Okay. So that's what I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for coming. Does anybody have any questions? I got about 7 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to answer them for you, right? It can have to do with anything that we talked about today. It can have to do with pretty much anything. If you guys just want to say hi, I'd love to say hi to you as well. So feel free, type into the chat window. I'm looking at the chat window now. And otherwise, we will have a very awkward next 7 minutes of me staring at a blank screen. So I'll take a look. Am I right, guys, that the way that it works is when you join the live stream, that it goes, does it go back to the beginning? I think it just makes you join live, right? I think so. And feel free, guys, if you're going to leave, just hit the like button on your way out because it'll help to push this up on the algorithm. I appreciate it. Kathy said in terms of this grad program, okay. Also Washington on the 23rd. Awesome, Kathy. That's great, Kathy. I don't know what on earth Maddox is talking about. Any questions, guys? All right. Seems like no questions, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and end it for today. If anybody's watching this video and they want to ask any questions or anything like this, I want you to feel free to do so down in the comments section. And make sure that if you guys have friends, colleagues, or students that you think would benefit either from this video, or if you guys got a lot out of the channel while you were applying and now you've gotten in, number one, thank you so much for joining us. Remember that we've got a lot of content here for people who are currently grad students. So please continue to be a subscriber, ask your questions. It's a joy to be able to be here for you guys. And make sure that you share the channel with other people in your life who are applying in the next cycle, because this is the reason we're here. This is the reason we're doing this, right? But all right, guys, God bless. Wonderful to see y'all, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.